Protest. This is Donald Jeffries coming to you from just outside the swamp infested Washington, D.C., as we do every Friday at this time. Very special guest today. We're not talking politics and corruption or anything like that as much as we normally do. But you guys know that a lot of times I have kind of Hollywood themes to shows. I'm a big fan of Showbiz Junkie, and we have someone here who's just lovely actress, Kim Karath. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Karath.
You pronounced it perfectly. Kim Karath. Yep.
That's great. Kim Karath, a veteran of show business. She was the youngest child, Gretel, in The Sound of Music, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with, 1965. So we'll talk about what that was like working with Julie Andrews and people like that. She was also on a lot of TV shows. And I tell you, Kim, when I was looking up, I was looking at your IMDb just to see what shows you'd been on and everything. And I told you beforehand that Susan Olsen's a friend of mine. I was on the Brady Bunch. And I thought, well, you're in an episode of the Brady Bunch. And that immediately I saw you in that episode. And I remembered that so distinctly because I remember, you know, I thought, wow, that girl's so cute. Because, I was about in between Peter and Greg's age, I guess. And so I remember that episode so clearly. And I had no idea that was you. And then I saw you. I loved Lost in Space. You were very young princess or something. And I remember that episode really well. So I couldn't find any pictures of whatever Walton's episode you were in, so I'm not sure what was going because I used to watch that show too. So anyway, it was cool looking at what you've done. It's amazing, and just being in The Sound of Music. So we had communicated with because I had noticed that you have a son that has special needs, and he's front and center on all your pictures on Facebook and everything. Clearly, your life is devoted to him. And as you know, I just lost my niece that had Down syndrome, so that was a big part of my life. So we had a common interest there. So I'm very glad that you consented to come on the podcast because I think you're a fascinating combination for me, anyhow, show business and something that's very dear to my heart. So thanks so much for coming on the show, Kim.
It's my pleasure. And after I read that article about your sister and your niece, it's a beautiful article. I recommend it very highly to everyone. I posted it on my Facebook page and, I hope everybody reads it. It had a lot to say about your relationship, not only your relationship with them, but about the way things have changed on a societal level as well with regard to acceptance of people with special needs. So a lot of that really touched me, and I felt that love between the way you wrote it between your sister and your niece. So
Well, that's very
bravo.
kind. That's very kind of you to say. And things really did change a lot because Denise was born in 1968, and that was when they were kind of anybody that wasn't normal, so-called normal, was kind of treated like a leper, and they tended to put them away where they wouldn't be seen. And so by the time your son came along, things had already changed dramatically. There's a lot more organization. We'll talk about that though, because I want to we'll talk about your showbiz career and then how your life changed and how you started an organization and everything. And so, but so let's go back to the beginning because I think you started acting when you were 3 or something like that.
I
So and
did. I
you're
started when I was 3. I was in a movie called Spencer's Mountain with Henry
oh,
Fonda and Maureen O'Hara. I played their
yep.
daughter. And then The Thrill of It All with Doris Day and James Garner. I played their daughter. I played basically everybody's daughter. And Good Neighbor Sam with Jack Lemmon. And I was his daughter. So, and then Sound of Music. So I was a veteran by the time I was 5,
Absolutely.
which
And
is
then let's see,
crazy.
Jason Barker's saying what we're all thinking. You look way too young to have been on those TV shows.
Oh,
You
I
do.
thank you.
You're not really well. I was most amazed that is that because of what just the stress and the challenges of dealing with your special needs son, that tends to, kind of wreak havoc with people's looks and age you faster. And you're going in the opposite direction. So it's wonderful that you've managed to maintain a very youthful appearance like that, especially with what you're going through. So I just wanted to throw one of the compliments up there that
Oh,
people are.
thank you. That's thank you very much. I've definitely it's an effort but I grew up actually it's a funny story, right? My mother was really beautiful and was from Greece and very, very an early skincare person. She was super fair too, and she had like a horror of sun. So when I would, back in the day when I was a teenager, it was in style to be really tan. And my mother would come and just yell at me and say, no, you can't do this, etc. Eventually, it was easier to go inside and not get tan. But I do think the sun, the avoidance of it helps. And I
Well,
like to think of stress as my beauty secret, actually, sleeplessness, stress, anxiety, but I do think it helps, as corny as it sounds, if you have a really positive attitude about it. And I adore my son. So I
but
think I'm fueled by love.
that definitely shines through. You can definitely see that. So so when you were, I guess, 7 or something like that, when The Sound of Music, you get picked up, that's what people are gonna remember you for, The Sound of Music, an iconic film, and people are still watching it, obviously, and all the songs that came from it that are just, standard tunes now. So how did that happen? And, I guess you realize that. I can tell from some of the photos you're still meeting the cast members and Angela Cartwright from Lost in Space and things like that. So you're still kind of like a family there. Talk about the Sound of Music experience.
Well, we did become a family because we spent so much time together and we were all really compatible. And I mean, talk about an experience to share. So some of us had experience being child actors, some of us didn't. Angela had been in Make Room for Daddy. Nicholas had been in on play and movies, and think he was in a movie, but definitely plays. And so, but some of my little group wasn't. But like, this experience was different from anything any of us had experienced before. We um, we traveled, many of us for the first time, transatlantically to go to Salzburg to film. We were in a foreign place with foreign food and everything different. And
Mhm.
we had 3 months there. It was supposed to be 6 weeks, but it rained so much that it ended up being 3 months. But it was 3 months rehearsal, 3 months filming on the lot, 3 months in Salzburg, plus post production. We spent a lot of time together and we ended up becoming very bonded. And then with the phenomenon that the movie became, we had all the follow up and all the publicity and publicity tours and dolls made out of our likenesses. And then it just went on and on because it became something so substantial in people's lives. So there was the 10th reunion, the 15th year reunion, on and on and on, till we just celebrated our 60th anniversary of the film in Salzburg, Austria in October.
And how did it change your life though? I mean, you were in a couple movies before, but this is obviously at another level. And you're having tours and reunions and everything later. And how so you're still a little girl. How did how did your classmates, in school, or how did your friends treat you? I mean, did it change your life?
Well, I started first grade just before Sound of Music came out. And once it came out and it was this phenomenon, like the kids that would have been inclined to be bullies were bullies, and the girls and boys that were nice were nice. So, but I hadn't experienced bullying before, and it was pretty intense in elementary school. And so I was really glad. I loved school and I'm good academically, so I enjoyed that part of it. But I was always glad to leave school and go film TV shows and do things, because it didn't settle down completely until I went to junior high. And then I went to a completely different school. It was a girls' school, private school,
Oh,
where everyone was supervised. And so a little bit of bullying started, and they just clamped down on the people who'd been bullying. So I sailed through my next junior high and high school with great pleasure,
well, that's great. Yeah,
honestly.
and I think I read somewhere, I guess, that I was looking, trying to research you and everything, and so you experienced at some point, maybe some, I'm gonna say that, but not the casting couch, especially when you were underage. And now with the Epstein list and everything out there, and I've written a lot about the Epstein files, and I see you were talking about it on your page and everything. So you
Absolutely.
you experienced something like that
I
how
did.
young were you when you first experienced something like that?
Well, my guess is that, in fact, we were talking about the Brady Bunch. My guess is that this particular man, who was a producer and a predator must have seen me on that, because I have no idea why that call came from my agent. It went through my agent for some movie that he was casting for and creating and etc. And my mother actually drove me. The interviews were at his house, which was weird in and of itself, but not unprecedented. And my mother drove me there, and I was very mature for 13. Well, I thought I was mature, and physically I kind of looked
Yeah,
mature.
you look
And he
older, yeah.
basically, started on what we now have words for, which was a whole long grooming process, which, wanted to take pictures of me, this and that, became, quote, a friend, until he raped me when I was 15. So
Oh,
that was,
okay. Oh, geez.
yeah.
Sorry,
And
sorry.
back in those days, nobody talked about those things at all. And I
Yeah,
mean, I certainly told my girlfriends, who I made swear to silence at that point. But my parents were Greek, very traditional, and they would have just blamed me, which is awful to say, awful,
yeah.
but it's
Mhm.
true. It was still back in the time when, society acted as though it was a girl's fault. What did you wear? Why did you go there? Et cetera, et cetera. And,
Yeah,
I certainly carried around gigantic amount of blame and shame for a long time. And then eventually, as society changed and I looked at, like, oh my god, yeah, that's grooming, and those were all the things that led up to it. Eventually, obviously, I don't feel the same. I mean, Giselle Pellicot had the best thing ever, the best line ever, which is that shame needs to change sides. And I felt
yeah.
that comment to the core of my being. Absolutely. I mean, I think, by the way, talk about a heroine. Wow.
Yeah, well, it certainly has changed. No wonder you have an interest in the Epsteins. I mean, theoretically, I don't know. You came along, I guess, a generation too early, but that's
Right.
kind of seems to be right the age group that was visiting the island. So, I mean, I
I do feel that very, intensely. I've been reading everything. It's incredibly upsetting. And, I mean, so there was that horrible thing that happened when I was 15. And after that, my parents did realize something had happened, because I kind of I changed a little bit, and then they said, "Why don't you just stick to school right now? Don't go on any more auditions, etc." Which I didn't, and I finished high school and then went to University of Southern California. And but when I got back in the business, it was full on casting couch, and it was very dumb blondish. It was the era of that. It was the heyday. So I worked on All My Children, not All My Children. Well, All My Children was later. I worked on Archie Bunker's Place, Dumb Blonde Thing, Midnight Offerings, Dumb Blonde Thing. And I got so disgusted with not only what I was doing, but actually the offers for things that were better, but that were essentially sleep with me and I'll give you this. Some network had basically said he would give me my own series if I but and that's not me. So I mean, I'm ambitious, but that's definitely not something that was going to happen. And so I decided, because I was only 24, that I would just go to Paris. So that's not one of my most well thought out decisions, but my father had died when I was 18, and I was I had been so focused on school, just surviving, because daddy was so it was his dream for me to graduate from university, because no one in my family had done that, and dad's education had been interrupted. And so I just kind of was like a horse with blinders on until I'd been harassed enough, and I just said, okay, I'm going to Paris. There you go.
oh, and so after, but it looks like were you in anything after that? Because I mean, I was looking at your
I was in All My Children. When I
okay.
went to Paris, I did what most young American girls who are super romantic and whatever, love Paris do, and I fell in love. And I lived in Paris and London. And then when Philippe and I, my now ex-husband, moved back to the States, I ended up working in All My Children before I had Eric.
Okay, how long were you on All My Children? I never watched
Not
that
but
one, but
not not very long. I was a guest who kept coming back to destroy relationships as a femme fatale. So, and yeah, and then we wanted to start a family, and I had my beautiful son. We had our beautiful son, and well, that changed everything.
yeah, let's talk about that. So it was 1991, and said that my son was born in '89. So and I know it had nothing to do with it, as we talked about that. But the we started seeing. My niece was born in '68, so society's attitude was way different then. And by the time you came along, at least people were more enlightened. And so, what did you face when you? I mean, I don't suppose you had anybody telling you to put him away or anything like my
Yes,
sister
yes,
had
I
with the rest.
did.
Oh,
Yes, I
did you?
did.
Okay, okay,
Yes, I
okay.
did. And in fact, that was one of the other things that really affected me in your article, because obviously I knew back then that was the case, but it still was. So in our situation, Eric was absolutely fine when he was born. 3 weeks after he was born, he got meningitis and had seizures, and it caused brain damage. So everything on the surface looked, quote, normal. But obviously, as he got older, deficits started showing from the damage, and his behavior was like off, and people would generally think it was autism.
Yeah,
Um, but but there was a period of time where he was very, very hard to manage. I'll be honest about it. It was hard, but that's my son, and I adored him, and I was gonna just do whatever had to take place. And even some people in my family were like, "It's too hard, you why don't you?" I had a doctor. I actually yelled at some doctor, and I don't like yelling at people, but Eric taught me how to yell at people, I might add, which I'm sure was the case for your sister too. Like
yes,
it,
yes.
no matter how nice you are normally, people are outrageously bad when it comes to the disabled. At and things are so much better now, but even in 91, 92, it was actually 2004, I think, was the last time somebody said, "Well, why don't you just put him in a home?" And it was a
Yeah.
doctor. And I just erupted in the office and grabbed Derek and left and just cried in the parking lot with him.
Hmm.
I mean, it's like so unnecessary. And he's such an angel now. And there are people I don't like to walk around hating people, but they're actually people I hate. Like, I hate that doctor. I actually wrote a letter, to whatever institution he was affiliated with, and that, and another doctor. And then I hate that doctor that stuck a filthy finger in my
Well,
son's
yeah,
mouth
you
when he
have
was 3 weeks
no, who
old.
wouldn't? I mean, that's
I
it's
have
just
like a
because we
list.
talked about and use all the language you want. We talked about it beforehand. You can say what you want on here. I don't cuss much, but anybody can say what they want. Nobody, they're not going to censor you. Talk about this was this was not the result of as my niece, just a birth defect, and or later what I believe vaccine the number incredibly increasing, exploding number of vaccines that just happened to coincide with exploding rates of autism. Wasn't anything like that. This was just a one really incompetent doctor. Talk about how that happened. I mean, just one moment of carelessness.
I went for Eric's well baby visit when he was 3 weeks old, which was the protocol back then. I understand now they actually don't have that same protocol now. They wait longer because there's an understanding that newborns are actually more fragile than we thought they were in the 90s. Go figure. And brought him in for his well baby visit, and he was crying, and I was trying to soothe him, and the doctor walked in, didn't wash his hands, and stuck his thumb in my son's mouth to suck on his thumb. And I remember my mom was with me, and we both gasped, and he said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous, blah blah blah." And honestly, we sound stupid because it took many years to put that all together, but several days later my son had a horrible fever. He'd started vomiting, etc. It was terrible. Rushed him to that office. It was a different doctor that day. And she said, "Oh my God, it's probably meningitis. We've had meningitis around." And, and then poor Eric was in the hospital. I was with him, obviously. And then he had seizures and almost died. So it's a miracle that he's in the kind of shape that he's in. And I thank God every day that he's as healthy and robust as he is, given what happened to him, which was monumental. So yeah, I hate that doctor. And it took me, I don't know, years later, I was reading on the internet, and I looked up meningitis in New York City. And there was an epidemic between January 1991 and June 1991, something like that. And we walked into an office where obviously there was meningitis, with a doctor who couldn't be bothered to wash his fucking hands.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And so were you ever, or you didn't realize until, I mean, I don't know what you
didn't
could have
realize
done. Could
till
you?
didn't realize till things till the internet was a real source of everything. And at one point I was like, how did he get meningitis? That's, so bizarre. What happened? And at the time they were like, well, it's everywhere, but it's not everywhere. So yeah, it was too late, and I think he'd moved somewhere else. I did search him out and
That's
wish
awful.
him ill as well, which I don't normally wish people ill, but
Well, it's awful to think that someone did that and just goes on
wrecked
with his life
someone's
and
life.
can't look at what happened to you and what happened to your son as a result of it. I mean, that's just, but as we said about, and from my article, that my sister believed that, and because we used to look at people like this as, you put them away, and they're flawed, severely flawed. And but more and more now, people that, and I can see in you definitely, we see them as blessings. My sister,
Absolutely.
they thought that, she was sent from God to, that way. So that, and as my sister said many times, she's taught me more than I could ever teach her. And I think that's a
Oh,
great, I'm sure you probably feel that way about your son. You probably learned so much from him.
absolutely. He's a really fine human being, and I can say that. He's 34 now. He's patient and loving, so loving, and so open to all the fun things in the world. I mean, he spends his time like dancing and singing his version of singing, which is very tuneful, but with no words, because primarily he's nonverbal, except for like my name, which is reliable all the time. Mimi, he calls me. And like if there's anything that is not to his satisfaction, he calls me. So it's adorable. And he's really sweet. And he does get new words. There's neuroplasticity in the brain. I'm a firm believer in that. So he lives his life with me, and we do lots of stimulating things. We watch opera, not all the time though, but mostly it's rock and roll. But we love James Taylor and all the classic people, and sing like crazy. And I think all those things help him. He's traveled with me. That's not the easiest thing in the world, but we read we read a lot. We look at art. I mean, I'm the best thing I can do for him is keep a lot of stimulation going on, and so
Well,
that's what
it's
I do.
because this is because this becomes your life. This is a full-time job. This is not, when you have a child like that, he's never going to go on his own. He's always going to be there, and you're always going to have to be there with him. So it takes so much more dedication. That's why I really admire you. I admire your attitude, but I can tell, and looking at the pictures of him online, every picture I saw of him, he was smiling. I mean, every
He's
one. I didn't see
an
him when he wasn't
angel.
smiling. Yeah.
Yeah, he really is an angel. I mean, he did have, as I say, there were some really rough years, and it's not as though everything is easy all the time. I would be so remiss saying that, and letting other parents of children with special needs think that it's effortless. It is a lot of effort. I mean, for example, my son used to have like a terrible behavior that's so dangerous and is considered intractable when people have that. So a teeny tiny percentage of the disabled population has something called self-injurious behavior.
Yeah.
And it can take many forms. In the case of Eric, he would hit himself in the head.
Yeah.
And so physically, I had to restrain him. I couldn't, to this day, I have helmets in, upstairs and downstairs, just in case the mood strikes him, which it hasn't in a really long time. But, I mean, and as he got stronger, it got more frightening. And it's just, I mean, they do there are things that are hard. And I can only say, which I do tell people a lot, it can get easier. I'm not saying it necessarily will, but it can. And I'm really lucky because in our case, it got much easier.
Well, I just admire you so much for doing. Tell us, so was he able to? What kind of schooling did he have? Was he able to have to go to special school, or was he mainstreamed?
Well, mainstreaming was not going to be an option for Eric. So,
Yeah.
and that's a very interesting question that you ask. When we first started, his school was special need class, and we were living in Greenwich, Connecticut at the time. Me and Philippe. He was working in New York, and we did what many people do when we had our child. We moved to the suburbs, and talk about a backwards place. Greenwich at that time was 30 years backwards in terms of the way they dealt with disability.
Very, very upper class though, right? There are a lot of wealthy people there.
Yes, and one of our, but also middle class people, and
Mhm.
and and quote lower class people. I mean, I even hate that word because what's a lower class person,
Lower
right?
income. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. Low income, exactly.
Mm.
So, but our we had assumed that moving to Greenwich, there would be trickle down going to special education. That because it was an affluent community, presumably with people who were well educated, that it would there would be a reflection of that in special education, and it was not true at all.
Mm.
And it was hell from the minute that started to and backwards until we left, and we ended up moving after Philippe's and my divorce, moving back to California. And I was told by my special need mom friends that there was an angel, literally an angel who's a teacher of special ed in Malibu at Malibu High School. And her name is Lisa Zalagi. We went, I walked into that classroom and I said to myself, I don't have to say another word. I don't have to fight. I don't have to do anything. This is the loveliest person with the most loving, inclusive classroom. And I tell her to this day, because she's my soul sister, that she saved our lives. It had gotten really dark. And Eric loves her. We started, in fact, that's how I ended up starting the foundation, co-founding the foundation with Lisa, that we have now, which we have a program for disabled, young disabled
Talk about that.
adults.
Promote it. What's the name? What's the website? We'll let you give the website out
So
later too.
it's the Aurelia Foundation, and our program is called Creative Steps. And after Eric had been in class with Lisa and all those other lovely young people, Lisa said, because she also has a wonderful daughter named Emily who's got special needs, which is why her heart was so into it, full and right about everything. She said she her dream was to start an adult program because after 21, 22, the kids age out of the public system.
Right. Right.
And so we said, a little group of parents and I, and said to Lisa, let's try to make that happen. And we ended up touring before because none of us had started a program like that before, or frankly, a foundation. We looked at what was available, and even in California, which is one of the very good states for disability, even here, there was an absence of really good programs for kids on the more developmentally disabled side of things. So on the more on the more
Sure.
compromised side. And the programs that we visited were so depressing that some of our tougher parents would just break down crying, and we knew that we had no choice. So we started a program 13 years ago, and it's the number one program in terms of recommendation by Regional Center, which is a state system that helps programs. So it's the number one recommended program. But we serve almost 70 young adults now, and we have to there's governmental money, but we have to raise a lot of money, which we do. We learned how to give galas and grant write and do all kinds of things. But we have I just found out yesterday at our meeting, our wait list is 175 young
Oh,
adults. And that's just so upsetting to even hear. I did not I thought maybe our wait list was like 50, but I got the actual number yesterday. And that just shows you how big the need is and
mhm.
how there aren't enough programs that can deal with this. Periodically, when I talk about things on a podcast or in an article, I'll get messages from other parents of special needs who live in other states, and they tell me, what do you know if there's anything in whatever state there is, and et cetera, and or they tell me, I've looked, can we start your program here? And one of Lisa's and my dreams was that if we ever, grow enough, she can go and really teach the better way to do things, the way to do it so that each individual is nurtured appropriately. Because one of the things we've made it such a mistake on a societal level is that there's been this dumping of disabled people in one category. They are as individual as everybody else. They are individuals, period. My son is not like my husband's son. My husband and I, my second husband and I met because both of our sons were in Lisa's class at Malibu
Oh,
High.
oh,
And he has a son who's got cerebral palsy. It was a physician error at birth.
cool.
But his son is totally different from my son. They're not, their
Yeah.
interests are not the same, their needs are not the same. I mean, again, everyone is an individual, including every single disabled person. And that's what we have tried to really support, is their individuality.
But you've learned so much, obviously, going, and I tell people, I could tell that with when my niece spent the last several months in these rehab centers and hospitals, and you could tell the few people that were caring enough for her, they had somebody in their life like that. Because I would talk to them, and I know, because I know how if you don't have anybody like your son or Denise, if you don't love somebody like that in your life, then you're going to look at it differently. You're not going to be sensitive because you haven't experienced it. We had people in our family that would, very Catholic family, and some of the old liners said, "Well, we never had that on our side of the family," as if is this some kind of flaw or something that my sister was responsible for. And there's still that feeling out there, but once it hits you, once it's somebody that you and I don't know how you were before this, but I'm sure this must have changed you dramatically. How did you look at people like your son before that? Did you give them a second thought, or were you already kind of sensitive to it?
I was always sensitive to it, always.
Well, good for you.
And I think it was, you know, as odd as this may sound, there's something about being bullied, whether you're bullied because you're special, right? I was bullied because I was, quote, special, right? Put that word special in front of special needs or in front of a little actress. It's, I mean, actually what I've been mulling about writing some sort of a memoir because people are always interested in all of this. And
Yeah,
I I,
good.
I think my title is actually special for this specific reason. Because I mean, early on, I was always, I don't know, I think whatever, I was probably a born empath, and I was raised by empathic people. And this is sort of funny, but this will take us back around. So my mother was born in Greece and then was raised in the United States. She came when she was like 7. And daddy was born in New York, but then ended up being raised in Greece. And my grandparents never learned a word of English. They were all here. Everybody was here. All the relatives were here. Nobody, I mean, there were no linguists among them, let's put it that way. And
Mhm.
they definitely brought the old country with them. My parents made me go to Greek school so I could at least, have some communication. But they were tough. I think they missed where they came from. They never quite fit in. But my parents always included them in everything, every birthday, every Christmas, every Thanksgiving. They never learned to drive. My parents would go pick them up, do everything. And they kind of bickered. And I remember one year I was pretty little and I said, God, do we have to have them? Does everybody have to be here? And my parents said, where would they go if they weren't here with us? You wouldn't
Yeah.
want them to be alone, would you? And, that obviously was a lesson for me right then and
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Well,
And
that's great.
was a lesson I needed to hear actually as a little girl. So my point is, I think I was naturally kind of, once on our Sound of Music tours, PR tour, we were in Chicago and we sang at an orphanage, and I was maybe only 7 or 8 at that point. And like, I can still remember my pain looking at all the kids and thinking they didn't have mommies and daddies. And, so I think I've
Yeah.
kind of always been this person, but, I've had some life experiences that
Well,
have.
you definitely are, and I don't know how spiritual they are, but that it would play into, maybe this was your role because you were set up for it. You're perfect. You're a perfect person to care for and understand and have a child like that, and to try to understand what other people are going through. Because I imagine it's always, I think, easier when you find people that are dealing with the same kinds of things. So having an organization like this, you must hear stories and you compare notes and you realize, okay, well, how are they dealing with that? And they might say to you, how are you dealing with that? But you said each one is different. It's not the same kind of thing. But that's wonderful that you have that innate in you, because a lot of times it has to be eh, you have to have it hit you, and then suddenly, oh, God, it changes you because you realize this. What are you going to do? And I think it's wonderful what you're doing because it's obviously a 24. I guess it's still a 24-hour job. I don't know
It
how.
is. It is 24/7. I had someone who helped me for a long time and she left. So now I'm training someone else. And that's always very labor intensive. There are things I still do and want to continue doing. For example, hopefully I wrote a film that hopefully will be filmed in Paris. It's been taking a long time to get that financing in place. We had cast, we had director, we had everything. But, if it does happen, someone will have to travel with me to Paris, and, I'll have to set everything up so that it works really well for Eric. And then I've got a tour with a friend of mine, Hershey Felder, who's an amazing performer, and we're going to be. He does these beautiful cultural tours periodically. With what spare time, I don't know, because he's always doing shows. And so I've agreed to go for almost 2 weeks to Europe to do this tour. We go to Salzburg and Vienna and Prague. And Salzburg, of course, he wants me to sing and do all those things, but it's a work trip. And I'm going to do it. My ex is going to come and stay with Eric, and hopefully our new person will be good, and then it'll be second nature to her too. But it's very hard to carve out time. If I'm the person, if I'm not, if nobody is around, then it's me. So that keeps me from trying to do things like go on, auditions that you could go on 50 auditions before you get one. And the time is so precious. So, and I can't drop everything. I have to be organized. And, anyway, that's my story on that.
Well, when you go to Europe, or when you go, and I don't know how often you do that, but will you feel strange without Eric? Because it seems like you're there all the time with him.
We
How
do
will you feel without him?
we do. Oh my God. I feel like a part of my body is missing. No
I
kidding.
bet, I bet, I
But
bet.
we talk on the phone, and we do FaceTime. Let me rephrase that. We do FaceTime.
Yes, yes.
And every day, probably twice a day, I show him where I am. We kiss each other on FaceTime. You actually can do that really well with FaceTime.
Oh yeah,
So
sure.
you
Denise
can.
used
And
we use FaceTime a lot with Denise. Yes.
yeah, it's great. It's the best thing. So, and I've never left him for longer than, I think I only left for 2 weeks on my honeymoon with Jeff, and Philippe and our other caregiver were here. And this trip is the only 2 week trip um, after that one. So it's the second 2 weeks in 34 years. So yeah, but
Yeah.
I'll be on FaceTime all the time for sure. and Philippe will be here. So thank God. His father is a wonderful father.
Yeah, so was
As I
was
think
was it
Denise's, you were saying Denise's father was a great dad.
well, he became a great da he became he was an alcoholic and, that was very rough for them. Denise was the 5th child. So for the first 4, it was very bad. But, I think something changed in him when she was born, and he ended up being more devoted to her, than the other and, when he died in last August, he died before they were sick, and then I think they both just kinda spiraled out of control after that because he was the caregiver. And, so it's just hard for me to grasp that that entire family is that, all 3 of them that were living in that house for a long time until the other kids left were gone in 5 months. They were very strange, but,
Well, they
it's,
were so interconnected.
yes.
In a way, I mean, their hearts were, I mean,
Yeah, I think
so
so, I think they were.
connected.
Like I said, my niece dying 4 days after my sister, I think she
Yeah,
sensed it. She sensed
absolutely.
something, because
Uh,
because my sister was so worried about what was gonna happen to her,
of
you
course.
know, and, so she didn't have to worry about it 'cause it was almost at the same time, so, but so you started this found so what exactly you said you have 70 adults and 100 and some on the waiting list, so
Yeah.
what exactly does your organization do?
Well, we we have a day program. So all the that's basically what the foundation created a day program and funds this day program. So they, each individual basically does what the things that they like. And where it's a community based program. So, they do things together or they do things alone, depending on the young adult and what their interests are. We have a young man who is very highly functioning and wants to work. And so he goes with a job coach because he needs someone to help him, do his day. And so we have coaches, basically we call them coaches for every single one of the young adults to help them. Some might make a choice to go to the farmers market. Some might want to go see a movie in a little group or whatever. They are as integrated into the community as we can have them be.
Now, in terms is there a wide variety of, functioning ability? I mean, are there that one obviously that sounds very high functioning. Is it how do they qualify even to be in your program? Do they have to have a certain level of functioning, or how does that work?
Oh, we wanted to create a program that would address the needs of even the most disabled in the population. That was what we wanted to do specifically. So there's no base. There's no. I mean, we have. There's a there's a young lady in our program who is extremely challenged, extremely, and her parents are the sweetest, most devoted people. She actually was absolutely fine and she fell into a swimming pool when she was a little girl and almost drowned. And so it's like maximum of damage. And they, they, she had been really unhappy in whatever the program she'd been in before. And the parents basically say, it's her smile. Her smile tells them how happy she is, and she beams. And that's somebody who wouldn't have had a program to go to. And she's taken to the farmers markets, and she's taken, different places. So I mean, we deal with an extreme as well. I mean, I think our young man that needs a job coach is one extreme, and Leslie's another.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I really admire that you don't put any qualifications on it or whatever because there's so many, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but I did volunteer with the Special Olympics, and later when I was coaching, I was a coach for them. Before I started writing all these books, my life was full of coaching my kids, and that was my life for like a decade. And I wanted to do something because they had already started mainstreaming uh, children that had some issues, and just like they do in school. And sometimes it was challenging if you had a kid that was, really like super ADA that you couldn't, he could not stay focused enough to even play the game. But most of the time they could do it. But we started a program called Top Soccer for kids that couldn't be mainstreamed. And these ones had really severe difficulties. So it was really rewarding. My kids were little then and they would come help and they would be like the buddy, like you'd buddy up with somebody. And you saw so many challenges that parents were facing. I remember one time there was a girl that she couldn't communicate. She's kind of made noises, and my daughter was good with them, but she kind of freaked her out because she was just hugging her real tight and just wouldn't let go of her and everything. And she was one of triplets because I talked to her parents. The parents were very nice, and they were all disabled. And she was the highest functioning. She couldn't talk, and I thought, imagine dealing with triplets that are, I mean, God bless them on that. But that's the kind of stuff to see those things. It really opens your eyes, to what's out there. And people, that read my work, obviously out there that know that I'm drawn to what I call the other half of society, the people that don't have anything. And this is really the other half, the people that are dealing with problems that,
It's
average parents have no concept of.
no clue. And it's even eye opening. Honestly, it's even eye opening to me, as familiar as I am with this landscape, because Eric is very healthy comparatively. It wasn't inevitable that it happened as well as it did, given the amount of damage that he has. But we have it easy comparatively. Now, my friends who are civilians, as I call them, right, who don't know this,
It's a
would
good way to put it.
say,
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
say, yeah, we have that expression in our little community, and not in the club, right?
Yeah.
So they would say, well, but Kim's done a really good job. Eric's hard. Eric is not hard in comparison to some of the situations I've seen. And, I think my husband's son is incredibly hard. And I think he's a rock star for being so gracious and
How old
doing
is
a
your
really
husband's
good
son,
job.
and what does what
Dylan
is he?
is 30, and he has cerebral palsy. That was physician
Oh, that's right.
error.
You mentioned it. Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
he's in a wheelchair. And he, I mean, the physicality of it is enormous. There are lifts and there are people to help and there are all those things. And he is more verbal than my son, but a lot of the words are horrible. I mean, he's angry a lot of the time. He can also be happy, but I mean, and Jeff is amazing. He really is. Most people I know, a, a lot of people have to rise to this occasion. Let's put it this way. There are a lot of people. I'll tell you another story too of another amazing dad. And it's one of the stories that I tell people because it still makes me gasp a little bit. So anyway, Jeff's amazing. He's got the patience of a saint. And I think he's an incredible father. But one of our other dads has this beautiful daughter. She's a, oh my God, what's the word I'm looking for? When someone can play, she just plays piano by ear right
Well,
away.
so
For
it's
all her, kind
savant.
of,
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of. And but she has a lot of disability. She can almost not see. And there's some other complicated issues. But she's incredibly sweet. So she's easy in one way because she's so, so, so sweet. But I mean, he's a trial lawyer, an incredibly successful, driven trial lawyer, and he was taking Christina to see a show one day, and she was really looking forward to it. I mean, she's a girl, and her period started,
Mhm.
and he said, Tony was just like, I said, "What did you do?" And he's like, "Packed a backpack full of stuff, and we went to the concert." I mean, like the way people do things with so much grace. I'm
Yeah.
surrounded by people who deal with things and they just are so casual, not casual, but I mean, they're so it's just part of their life. And so there are a lot of people I admire, and in our world,
Well, these are the profiles encourage because it's hard enough, as a parent, it's hard
yeah,
enough being a parent when your kids are so-called normal. I mean, it's
right.
really hard most of the
It
time. I
is a
mean,
hard
some people
job anyway.
it's a hard job anyway, but when you have these added challenges and you don't have the support maybe of everybody, like I said, in those cases, a lot of times families don't understand, they look at it like, I mean, we had people in our family that would kinda, look at Denise like, what is she, I'd look suspiciously at her, I never understood that, but, because they weren't used to it. It
It's
was like an alien
terrible,
to
though.
some
It's
people.
so
Yeah,
terrible. I'm
yeah.
sorry you all had to go through that. I've been through it, as well. And wow. I mean, bravo, especially back then with your sister on that.
No,
And yeah, it's hard to be a parent anyway. I don't have the experience of a typical child, but I had my nephew who was like, I call my first baby because, my sister is older than I was and had him. I was 21 when she handed me my nephew, and I was like, yay, I get to have a baby now,
mhm.
and so I had a blast with him. But so I've seen what regular parenting looks like, and all my girlfriends, of course. So, and that's hard anyway. But yeah, let alone with the other challenges. It's true.
Well, sure, you just I mean, I one of my what I huge SCTV fan, and, just Martin Short just lost his daughter
Oh my
to
God.
suicide. I mean, it just you never and it happens and Rob Reiner, and it's I mean, that's you never know what you're getting, and, in
You don't.
your old industry, I mean, it seems to, like, because it obviously creates a lot of trouble when if your parents are famous and you have so much to live up to, and you can't remember, especially if someone's famous enough. Like we used to talk about in baseball, Mickey Mantle Jr., eh, what was he supposed to do with his life? Of course, he wanted to be a baseball
What
player, and he
what if
wasn't
he
as
was a
good. But I
klutz,
mean,
right?
I mean,
You
I
know?
mean, you're
Yeah.
talking about living in the shadow of somebody. So out there, that's got to be really true. I don't know if you could, but did you ever, or was it just obviously you realized you couldn't because of the challenges involved? Did you ever think of having other children?
I think listen, I would have liked to have had another child, but Philippe saw how hard I was working with Eric at that point. And, you know, it was also kind of hard for me to be. I mean, I loved being pregnant, but I was like, it wasn't an easy thing. I'm just like, there's some women that go through pregnancy pretty
I've heard it's not
easily.
easy.
And
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved I mean, I loved every part of it except, yeah, I threw up for 4 months. Yes, I had the beginnings of preeclampsia. I was in, labor for extensive number of hours. I'm kind of, and I think Philippe was concerned about that too, and could see my devotion to Eric, and so that was not in the cards.
Well, I certainly can see that, and it would have, what, and so was Eric born in France or here?
He was born in New York City.
Okay, so I was just trying to figure out where that doctor was. Okay, I figured it's
Doctor
one
was
of the
in New
ones in our
York
crack
City. He's
system, huh?
not there anymore. He's back in South Africa where he was from.
Oh, okay. Well, that's it. And again, it's awful when people one person's actions like that, and it kind of spirals out. Let's go back to Hollywood a little bit here, lighten it up because we have two great things, two very interesting things to talk about. So I I'm wondering what give us a story about you worked with so many famous you probably don't remember Doris Day or Henry Fonda that much. You were so little. I don't know what you even were you any
Well,
impressions of them at all?
sure, because I had the chance to, well, two Henry Fonda stories. So one my mother told me, and my mother generally told the truth, so I'm sure it's true. So when I did Spencer's Mountain, I couldn't read yet. I was only 3. So my mother read me the script, and my memory at that point was photographic. I mean, it was just like you told me something and I would remember it.
Mhm.
And so apparently he dropped a line or two in some of our scenes, and I told him what his lines were. And I don't think he I think he said something like, well, we don't need a script supervisor anymore because, the 3-year-old can tell us, what the lines are. But later on, I obviously he didn't take it badly because he cast me many years later. I did a play called Our Town, and Henry Fonda directed it and also played the stage manager character. And Jim
Oh,
Backus played my father. It was at a theater called the Huntington Hartford in Los Angeles.
big
So
names,
I,
yeah.
yeah, I got to know him a little bit then, and lovely, urbane, sophisticated, soft spoken professional man, just really lovely. So obviously I hadn't alienated him that much from my script supervising
I'm
job
sure he took it
back
well.
then.
You probably kept your age in mind. So and Maureen O'Hara, Julie
Just
Andrews, Christopher
just
Plummer.
beautiful. Maureen O'Hara was so beautiful. It was my first movie star that I had seen, and she had the same coloring as my mom at the time. My mom went through a phase of sort of reddish hair. I don't know why, because she looked better blonde. But anyway, but she was so elegant and so like it was really funny because they were playing sort of poorish farmers, and she was so glamorous. And I remember thinking the costumes and something in my young
Yeah,
brain was saying, but she's so beautiful and like her hair is so perfect, does this make sense? And but Doris Day, oh my God, I remember her so vividly. Well, and I met her later as well. Very warm, very sweet, basically as sunny a person in real life as you think she would be. And I went to one of her events for when she had started. It became, they changed the name for it, but it was Actors and Others for Animals back then. And I was grown. I was, I don't know, 17 or so. And
yeah, she was
I
really
walked
into animals. I know. Yeah,
yeah, and I walked up to her and I introduced myself, and she put her arms around me for the rest of the event. She had me on her arm and introduced me as her daughter. It was very cute, as her film
oh,
daughter. Very nice.
well, you had some
And
great
I
experiences.
I I did some events for, that found her animal foundation later on. And she was still alive and wrote me a beautiful letter thanking me. And by then she wasn't being seen in public as much. And Jack Lemon, I had ended up having lunch with by accident after I'd grown up, as I didn't really remember him from the movie, but we were at the same restaurant and I went over to introduce myself and he made me sit down and have lunch with him. And I was at SC at the time and he was very proud of me for pursuing my education and told me how important it was for actors to have good educations, and just lovely. I've had really great
It
experiences.
sounds like it. What happened now that Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer? Obviously, you got along great with the kids because you're still friends and you still do stuff together. But how was Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer?
Julie and Chris were great. Julie, I could talk about forever, so I'll start with Chris first. So, I he would just was very professional and lovely to work with for the movie, but we didn't really have any special time. But many years later, after 9/11 was 9/11, and so a lot of years later, 9/11 had just happened, and there was a theater in Westport, Connecticut called the Westport Country Playhouse. By then, he was living there, as was Paul Newman. So a friend of mine had invited me to go, and it was for firefighters. It was some sort of really beautiful event. And they were all on stage reading poetry, doing various recitations and all the rest. But somebody had told Chris Plummer that I was there. So he was expecting me to go backstage. And it was actually Paul Newman who greeted me when I went backstage and said, "Your father's been waiting for you. He's been pacing the floor." And so I went there and saw Chris for the first time, and he was as gracious and warm and lovely as can be, and invited me to go to their home in Westport, which there was a lot of chaos going on with Eric at the time, so I never took him up on it. But I saw him later when we did Oprah together, and he's just a lovely person. Saw him a few other times. Very as sophisticated and elegant and charming as you would think. And Julie is a sweetheart. We
Mm.
email one another. So I kind of get to know what's going on behind the scenes a little with her. It's always a joy to see her. And I will say that one of my favorite Julie stories, it's a sad story, but it's a great story. I ran and I would run into her. So we were in one another's lives. And but my mother was dying of pancreatic cancer. It was in 2004. And I had taken my mother to get her hair done because my sister and I were giving her a party. Uh, she died like 11 days later. My mom was kind of amazing, actually. And you would never have known unless you knew her well how sick she was. So we had to get the hair done. And I popped into the salon next door where my person was, probably to cry on her shoulder. And I ran smack into Julie. And Julie took one look at my face and said, "How are you, my dear? How are you okay?" And of course, I, started to cry, and she hugged me and gave me just the best hug and the best words of support. And, you know, it was nice to be reminded that, and she'd been through a lot in her life too. So to be reminded of the strength that I, needed to muster and would have. So I don't think she remembers that. And I didn't, I should probably write that to her in the next time I email her because it meant a lot.
Well, that's so cool. You have all these contacts now. You must have had some day. You must have known somebody that was a jerk or something. You just don't want to tell us or what?
Well, I definitely knew people that, I avoided like the plague, particularly during the, casting couch era. There were some
Well, sure, of
scabrous,
course.
horrible human beings in that period of time. And I think, that's another thing. I don't think I was prepared for it because I had had really good experiences with incredibly professional people at the top of their game. So when I got back in the business after college, and you would have these horrible casting people and I mean that's when there was all the horror of it all together at one time. Because before then, no, I really didn't have any bad experiences. I had good experiences. Now, did I have a good experience when they decided to use me instead of my double for the rowboat scene when we did Sound of Music and I almost drowned? Absolutely not. That was very, very bad experience. And it was a mistake. Robert Wise never made mistakes in general, but he made a mistake for that, for sure.
Oh, certainly glad that that you didn't drown. That's
Yeah, that
so
was the
when
worst experience I had. And that was on Sound of Music. And I mean, again, you know, that was just such an error. It was an error in judgment. It wasn't abuse. It was just like really a mistake. And he even asked me, Robert was so sensitive. He's like, "Kimmy, could you be a team player and do this scene? I know you can't swim. We'll have somebody jump in case, but Julie will catch you." Julie was traumatized by it too. We've talked about it because just before cameras rolled, he went to Julie and said, "You need to make sure you catch the little one when the rowboat tips over because she can't swim." So, I mean, and she was a mom and a super responsible person. So that scared her. And we did this scene twice. And the second time the boat went in the wrong direction. She went in the wrong direction and they had to have the guy jump, jump into the water
oh,
and,
that must have
grab
been
me.
very scary.
Yeah,
So you obviously had the most awful thing imaginable happen to you when you were 15. So years later, I don't know, when was it? Probably 5, 6, 7 years ago now with the Me Too movement with Harvey Weinstein and all that. When you started hearing about that, how did that change your look? Did you start talking about this more? Did
I
you
did.
start opening up? Yeah.
I did. Yeah. That's when I told the story. And I did it pretty discreetly initially because I mean, there was a picture that horrible man had taken of me, and I said, 15 might look like 18, but it's not, and etc. And then people picked up on the story as time went on, and I
Wait a minute, he took pictures of you that he had kept or did something with or with all that time or?
he was a producer, he was a photographer,
Okay.
at one point, he said I needed better pictures, and my mother was like a little oblivious about what that ended up meaning. And she wasn't oblivious to much, but there was something about that particular experience that she was kind of clueless about. And so they were great. They were good pictures, but they were pictures of I think I was 14 actually at the time, you know, that made me look a lot older because I did look older, but, you know, promoting the sexuality that much of a young teenager is a really vile thing to do. So,
Yeah. And
in
obviously we
addition to
see,
the rest,
so I can see why you're and you why you're talking about the Epstein files and stuff like that on the Facebook, because that's you're getting into my wheelhouse, because that's mostly what I talk about is corruption and conspiracies. That's my world, but certainly
it's so
and
horrible. As you can tell by my Facebook posts, I've been kind of obsessed with it too, and I
yeah,
can't believe everything that's there, that's written, I cannot believe the wide swath. I cannot believe the gross misogyny and all the rest of it going on from people that are at the highest quote unquote levels of our society.
sure, sure.
It's just so, yeah, you've heard me. I'm apoplectic too. So right with you there.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, who wouldn't be? But I mean, it's in fact, because we all kind of know that nothing's going to happen. Probably, I mean, we all just kind of assume that they may find somebody low level that nobody's ever heard of. But I don't think anybody rich and famous is gonna pay for this. But uh, probably when I loved Woody Allen films forever, and it's just like I can't, I don't think I can watch one anymore. I'm
Me
just
neither. Same for me. I loved Woody Allen. And then when all of that started, I'm like, well, God, I hope that's not the case. But there's like something niggling in you when you kind of think
oh
about it and you
yeah,
see like Manhattan again, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, but Margot
And
Margot Hemingway was, I think, she was underage in the movie, I think, and he was like,
Mariel. Yeah, she
I'm sorry,
was. Yeah,
Mario Hemingway. He was 40-ish,
yeah, she was
and I think
underage.
she was under 18. And I thought, I don't even know how that film got made,
I know.
because
Well,
the
but it was
relation,
like
yeah,
okay back then, right? We overlooked stuff. I'm not saying it was ever okay, but I'm saying we overlooked those kinds of things. I
yeah,
remember it kind of turned my stomach at the time, but he's such a genius in terms of so
yeah.
many other things. And all the Polanski stuff and all of it is a genius. But in addition, they're like I don't know. So yeah, Epstein with Woody Allen was depressing too, on top of everything else.
Yeah, that's from maybe Epstein loved that movie. That was one movie. I just don't think it was very good either. I just don't think it was a good movie, and when I didn't realize how young she was at the time, but I realized that, I don't know what's so there, even beyond the legal aspects of it. It was just kind of a stupid thing to think that there would be a relationship between
It was
those two.
stupid. It
Yeah,
was
it
stupid.
it just
I
didn't
agree
make any
with you.
sense.
Yeah, me
But
neither. I was like, oh, it was creepy. It was creepy. That's the truth of the matter. And a lot of things were creepy, and we just sort of moved along through them. And I'm glad that now at least there's some change, and there needed to be. I have to tell you, I'm not sure you know this, but I obviously follow a lot of things in France too. And Me Too was not moi aussi, which would have been the exact translation of it. It was, I think it was balance ton porc, which means throw away your pig. And
okay.
I just had to laugh. And they've grown. France has just, it was really, as much as they're so advanced in everything, they were patriarchal and not protective enough about women either. But all of that has changed in the last few years. I mean, you have like Gérard Depardieu. It was an open secret apparently about him and his behavior.
Mhm.
And so there's been people are having to face the music on that, which is good. It should be, and it should be worldwide.
Well, the media was. I mean, look at all the lots and lots of the rock stars that we liked. I mean, they openly had underage girlfriends. Look at all the songs that there were Sweet 16, Only 16, 16 Candles, just about 16-year-old girls alone. There's so many titles of that. And, I think there was a song called Jailbait, and, you had a group like the Runaways who, were they were marketed as underage sex pots. That was their whole thing. I don't know if they I'm not sure if they actually were underage, but that's the way they were marketed. And, of course, the name, the Runaways,
Yeah.
what were they? Because my sister would ask me sometimes, like, how did some of these girls get involved with Epstein? What families did they come from? I said, well, they obviously didn't come from, good families most of the time. Like, for instance, Virginia Giuffre, who was the most, they ignored her while she was alive. I wrote about her when she died, it's awful, but now she's kind of become a martyr. Everybody's paying attention to her now.
Absolutely. I'm reading her book, and it
Yeah.
is so disturbing. I mean, what
Oh,
she
it
went
is.
through as a child, what she went through, let
Yeah.
alone what happened later. Frankly, what happened later.
Hello? I lost you, Kim. Kim? Can you guys still hear me? I don't know what happened to Kim. Kim? Hello, Kim? Okay, hopefully Kim's gonna call right back in. I'm not sure what happened there. Hopefully she'll come back, or somebody didn't like us talking about Virginia Giuffre. The conversation had strayed into there she is. Okay.
Know what happened. I
What
lost.
happened? We lost you. I thought they
Um,
didn't like us talking about the Epstein's.
well, I know. Okay. So let's talk about it some more and see
Yeah,
if we, yeah, exactly. But I'm just so, she wrote a terrific book. It really is good. It is
she
hard to
was
read, but it's excellent.
no, she was wonderful, and I just she was mistreated too. Again, I you can read. I wrote it. I think it was so long Virginia Free. I don't know what it was, but I wrote about her last year when she died, and a couple months after that, you know, suddenly she's everybody's hero, but she couldn't get anybody to answer her calls while she was alive, and so I don't know. Good for her, I guess, but her background was such that her father worked at Mar-a-Lago. Her father worked, but he was like a
I
groundskeeper or
know.
something. They didn't have any money.
I
Yeah.
know. And
Yeah, and
introduced her. Yeah.
but I can understand from her standpoint, I don't think she was thinking of sex or anything, but she was a young girl, maybe 14, 15, I don't know, and she thought it would be
Six.
exciting to be I think she was a bathroom attendant or something like that. She was a low-level thing there, but there was a lot of famous people there, so, a lot of
Well, but
girls that age love to see celebrities.
and that job was just a job, and it was, whatever she was being paid. But, in her book, she said what happened was Ghislaine Maxwell spotted her
Yeah,
and then
that's what
said,
happens.
do you want to make a lot? Come and meet this man. It's only 5 minutes away. Her father drove her to his house
Yeah,
many
yeah.
times, to Epstein's house.
I'm sure his father, again, this guy's a billionaire. I mean, I don't maybe I guess fathers weren't thinking that way. I don't. Again, the guy doesn't. He has a low level job himself. Maybe he's thinking, hey, maybe this will lead to something for me. Where I have,
Well, and he molested her. Her father.
yeah, that's
So that
yeah.
was, yeah. But I don't think he was thinking it. By then, I guess apparently he'd cleaned up his act. I don't know how clean your act is going to be when
Right,
that's your
but my
past,
point is,
but
and I had someone on my show. I can forget her name. It's been several years back, but she was trafficked when she was young, and she talked about she had a single mother, and her mother was like I think a housekeeper or something, but she worked at a hotel and they lived in the hotel. So she was by herself all day. And so of course she's wandering around and she met an older girl, kind of a Ghislaine Maxwell type that would befriend them. And that's how they groom them in. They become friends with them and then they get them, and it's we know obviously what's going on now. It's a horrible racket, but it's a worldwide thing. And I've written in my books about the Franklin credit scandal, which involved mostly boys, but in Nebraska, but was these people play for real, and several of those kids died very mysteriously, after they talked. One of the little girls was charged with perjury, you know, you charge a kid with perjury because she was naming the
Unbelievable.
newspaper publisher and the chief of police, and that's just in Nebraska. So imagine what's going on in California or New York.
Oh, absolutely. And don't you think they need to dig up that ranch in New Mexico? I mean,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you even had something like if you remember the McMartin preschool in California, and everybody in the entire. I mean, I written about that, and everybody, the entire media was basically calling the preschoolers liars. I mean, they were all on the side of saying this is crazy. Later, after they had been exonerated, they found the tunnels underneath there. They did some excavation, and they found that there were tunnels under there. So the kids had been telling the truth, and or at least about the tunnels. And that's that's the kind of thing where we don't want to believe it, but then we also don't want to believe something like looking at something like something like I like Woody Allen. There's other movie stars that have been mentioned that have gone there. I don't know, but I mean, if you're fans of them, you don't want to believe it. You want to believe that
no.
they're doing that. You know,
And of course we don't have a history of believing victims, right? Although we've gotten
right.
much better at it. But that's been a real scourge on society and on the lives of people who were victimized. Absolutely. I hope that we're changing that now. It's certainly taken long enough.
I hope so too. Okay, thank you, Bronx Stopper in the chat room. He says, for instance, all the girls in the Runaways were born in 1959, except Joan Jett, who was born in 58. So there were four or five of them were underage during their first year. So, but they were marketed that way, and that's and that's the way. Look at Pretty Baby, a film like Pretty Baby that was
Oh,
it was shown at the Cannes Film Festival in 1979. I think Brooke Shields she was entirely naked. She was 12 years old. That would be considered child porn today.
yeah.
And it was directed by Louis Malle, who was the husband of Candice Bergen, Murphy Brown. And I don't think they could show that film on television anymore. But it
Well,
was
I think not. And I don't they don't ever show in the movie The Thrill of It All. There I had a nude scene. I was 4 and Doris Day gave me a bath. Now that scene, they don't show the full nudity anymore when they show it on TV. We were friends of mine had a benefit for me for our foundation in Palm Springs, and they showed the entire movie, uncut. And it's funny because a couple of my friends were like, "Wow, that was a little," and it wasn't meant to be anything,
yeah.
but it kind of it's a little jarring, you know?
No, I'm sure it wasn't that, and that's the problem where you can go too far. And so we had parents back in when you still had these, you still developed photos before cameras, digital cameras. You'd take them to 1 hour photo or photo moto or places like that. And you had people being turned into the police that had taken pictures of their children younger than you just in the bath. That's a standard thing. We've all
It
done
was
that.
it's a little too
And
much, right?
yeah, and that's the problem is that you can go too far. You have to, determine, okay, what is too far and what isn't. But this obviously it's nice that it's growing awareness. And again, it goes into because I've talked about Epstein for a long time, and it's interesting that he's coming into he's now I guess getting more attention than ever. But I like to see that the fact that you're very aware of it. But do you think you would have as much of interest in as much of an interest in this if what had happened to you at 15 had never happened?
I do, but I mean, I don't know. It happened, so I couldn't say, you
Right,
know.
you can't divorce yourself from it,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Well,
it
it
was
sounds like you would because as you said, you were kind of a natural empath, and, you were prepared for the role of mother to,
like, you
get
know,
again, because it's obviously whatever role the average mother's doing, yours is, I don't know, 10 times
bigger,
as hard, 20 times as hard, I'm not sure. And we
bigger.
didn't we didn't talk about, like, how like, I don't wanna I don't know, this is delicate, but, like, what can Eric do and not do? Like, can he feed himself?
Yeah, he can
Okay,
feed
good.
himself. He doesn't always choose to, but he can. And if it's a complicated food, he needs help for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and he can dress himself with a little extra help.
Mhm.
His focus, and not complicated. He can't do buttons or, zippers or, complicated things. But, he certainly cooperates in all those things. Like he can't bathe himself and he can't shave himself. But, the other day I looked away for a second and he was shampooing his hair, which I'd never seen him do himself.
Mhm.
And so I was like, yay,
Yeah,
I go nuts for how
yeah,
wonderful those things are. And
sure.
but he needs supervision for everything. And you can't ever leave him alone. So because he can't pick up the phone to make a phone call and say there's a problem, or he can't call 911. And so and because he can't communicate very well, like going to the doctor's nightmare. It is. I mean, we could say Mimi and water and hi and bye bye. Those are words that do come out with some regularity. Last night, he had a version of "I love you." It was so darling, but he can't say, my stomach hurts, my head hurts. He'll
Yeah,
show
yeah,
you,
yeah.
but if you don't have someone sensitive and really paying attention to all the way he signs things, then it's tough.
But
And
you know, imagine you know him well enough that you can tell at this point. You can probably,
I do. I do.
yeah,
But one of the things that gets difficult is if there's something wrong and I can't figure out what it is, particularly physically. And, I've run down my checklist of things that it could be. And, I mean, I, I spend a lot of time looking things up.
sure.
I laugh sometimes because I think, back the kings of France all had their personal physicians and the people who dressed them and all the rest. I'm like,
Yeah.
he is the king of he's a French king for sure.
Mhm.
And I'm his personal physician.
Yeah, there you go. It's like, well, that's what I understand. They with the, well, I don't even want to talk, but what we've heard supposedly what they did for the royal family, but they pretty much did everything for them.
Oh, they did everything.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And so we were laughing about that the other day because I was, helping with the bath and doing all the creams. And, I'm a big skincare person. So poor Eric had eczema and a lot of little allergies when he was an infant. His skin is flawless now. I've got it down to a science of all his allergies. And I'm kind of the person in my friends call to say, I have a stomach ache. My left elbow hurts. I'm like, okay, did we try blah, 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 blah. You open my cabinets and they're like a homeopathic, palace there.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
because you have to figure it out yourself. Otherwise, I mean, you can go make a lot of bad choices. And there were medications that were recommended early on that were horrible. I mean, I'm not anti medication, but I'm not pro it blindly either. And I think you need to ask a lot of questions and try to have things be as kind of healthy and natural as you possibly can.
Sure. Well, I'm certainly a believer in that. We talk about that all the time. I'm a firm believer in homeopathic medicine, but it's as you said, sometimes maybe it's that's is he on any prescription medication?
He's on an anti-seizure medicine, but that's it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So, and one of the milder modern ones. And he hadn't been for many years because he didn't have any seizures. And then he had one out of the blue that almost killed him, and I was when he was 18, just after many, many years, after 17 years of not. And then after that, he wasn't on one for a long time. And then he had one out of the blue. And I just thought, okay, we'll stay on something like forever because we never want to see that again. So, but otherwise, lots of good vitamins and, lots of kind of healthy ways of dealing with things and
Well,
handling them physically.
sound like you're doing a great job. If you're up to it, what I usually do, and again, this is hit or miss because sometimes more people participate than not. But I what I do is I put a link in the chat room, and people that are interested, if they want to ask you questions or whatever, they can come on, and maybe there'll be video. Not that many people show their faces, but sometimes they do. Well, they can be on
Okay,
if you're up to that.
if I can see it, let me get my
Yeah, oh yeah,
glasses
you'll see.
because
Yeah,
our screen our
they'll come
screen is
into
so
they'll.
small. Where will I see it?
Oh no, it'll be. We'll just get smaller. It'll be there. It'll and they'll you'll
Okay.
hear it.
Okay.
So I'm just going to just
Sure.
put the
Why
Okay.
not?
Yeah, I thought you might like that. So most people usually do. But here you go. So I'm putting the link in the chat, guys. So if you you know the routine, if you want to do it. So and yeah, we're talking about basically we're just gonna have, I don't want any questions about the JFK assassination stuff. Something we normally would talk about. That's what we're gonna have. This is gonna be kind of keep to the subject. Although we can ask her what she thinks of that. That's my wheelhouse issue. That's where I got started down these rabbit holes that have consumed me for most of my life. So, but I do I'll have to I'll check with you afterwards. I'll contact you. But you mentioned bullying. One of my books is about bullying accuracy, which you might find interesting because you were bullying and just being the parent of someone like Eric. Uh,
Absolutely.
you're naturally going to
Definitely.
be, and it was inspired by my brother who got bullied a lot, and I lost him 4 years ago,
Oh,
and my
I'm
niece.
sorry.
So it's they were both inspired. So and
Yeah.
it had the unfortunate sense of timing to come out right as COVID hit, so it kind of got lost in the shuffle. And I'll let here we are. We already have someone here. What? All right, White Wolf. Oh, we have RB Ham too. Okay, so these here you go. Let's go with RB Ham. And RB Ham's a very courageous guy. He's out of Canada. He was part of the Canadian truckers. Hey, RB Ham, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good, Don, and nice to meet you, Kim. I
Thank
watched
you. Nice
Sound of
to meet you
Music.
too.
I watched Sound of Music when I was young. I really enjoyed it. Um, I didn't appreciate the whole story at the time, and then when later on I read the true story behind the Von Trapp family, and I thought it was amazing. This is my wife, Stephanie. Say hi.
Hello,
Hey, Stephanie,
hi.
how you
She's
Hi,
in.
doing? How you doing?
Stephanie.
Hi,
You,
Hi.
you,
Don. Hi.
hey, you
Have
got her working
any
with it.
questions for?
RB is out there trucking every day. So he has a podcast Saturday night, which I appear on a lot. And it's his only day off. So he's an amazing guy.
I got in early today because I had a dentist appointment at 3, so I'm in my car with my wife. We're at a fast food joint getting some taco time. But I did want to ask Kim, when you were young at the time and doing all this acting and stuff, did it really dawn on you what you were doing? Was it just like you were there for the ride? You didn't really understand what was going on and only appreciated it later? That's what I was wanting to ask, because it would seem like um, it would have just been a whirlwind of action. You really never really understood what was going on at the time, and then later on figured it out.
No, I understood what was going on at the time. There's so much structure and there's so much precision in all of that. It's hard sometimes for people to understand how professional, like even little kids, have to be doing that. It's a tough job. It's a lot of waiting and remembering and hitting your marks and being so you're very focused on and if it's not good, they'll tell you right away. And there's a lot to learn always. So I was very much in the moment doing that. The only thing that I did not fully understand was because I was really little, is that I was playing a historical character doing The Sound of
Oh
Music,
yeah,
that the Von Trapps were these
yeah,
real and amazing human beings that I was privileged. I had the
Yes,
privilege of meeting later, and the privilege and honor. They were amazing. So
yeah,
it's an incredible story,
it really is.
and the dark undercurrent of the whole movie about with the rise of the Nazis and all that, and how they
absolutely.
were indoctrinating the kids in the school. That would have been
Yeah,
just horrible to live through, something like that. Although we kind of figured that out during COVID, and what they were doing in the school through COVID was kind of
yeah.
similar, how they were propagandizing the children and all this. So yeah, it's just amazing. How about when you were doing when you were doing all that acting? What were your parents? How were your parents with you? Did they make sure you got your schooling, that you stayed grounded and all that stuff? They didn't let it
Thank,
get to your
thank,
head like
well,
some.
yep, absolutely.
Hold this for a second.
I come from a very, I came from a family of immigrants, basically. I mean, Greek immigrants. My parents were born, well, as I said before, my father was born in New York, but mom was born in Greece. And so there was all the Greek influence of the church and the language and the food and all the celebrations and our family in general, which was a huge priority, and education in general, which my father had a huge priority for. And I was a straight A student always. I was really lucky from that point of view, super gifted academically. So even if there was insufficient things, I sought it out. But by law, we needed 3 hours of schooling a day. So there was always a
Yeah,
teacher on set. And for Sound of
right.
Music, we had a lovely teacher who traveled with us and took us on field trips while we were in
Oh,
Salzburg.
that's
So
nice.
yeah.
Okay,
Well, that's
brother.
fantastic.
I'm going to let you
You bet.
enjoy it, brother. I'll talk to you tomorrow night, right?
Yes, you will. See you tomorrow night, Don.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
Bye.
All the way from
Bye.
Canada. We have White Wolf. All right, White Wolf, don't give us a long lecture on Catholicism. White Wolf is an incredible expert on Catholicism, maybe the foremost expert in the world. What's up, White Wolf? What's on your mind?
Oh, I'm just proud to be talking to what I consider as a cultural icon.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
I'll embarrass Dawn. Dawn said last week, "Oh, I never watched The Sound of Music," and
I watched it this week. Again, and why did you have to out me like that? I never watched it, and I watched it this week online. I found it and I watched it, and thanks. I was gonna try to hide that from my guest. Go ahead.
I would never have known it.
Well, I knew all about it. I knew the songs. I'd seen scenes of it, and but I just never watched it from beginning to end. So I watched it, and obviously a great iconic film. Go ahead, White Wolf. Now that you've embarrassed me, what else do you have to say?
yeah. Well, I told Dawn last week. I said there were two movies I thought everybody in my generation saw: The Sound of Music and Star Wars. And the Sound of Music was my mother's favorite movie, and and I could sing every song in The Sound of Music by the time I
By the time you were what? We lost you, White Wolf. White Wolf. I don't know what happened to his sound, but it was obviously pretty small by the time. White Wolf, are you there? Okay, maybe he'll pop back in again or whatever. But and again, anybody else wants to chime in, you can jump in. I see a lot of people in the chat room. But obviously, this is a film that somebody in the chat was talking about how they. You probably remember that, but back then, that one of the popular themes of birthday parties, a lot of times you'd have a movie birthday party where you go see a movie together. I don't know if you ever did that, but I remember I didn't, but I was invited to a couple of parties like that. I think we saw That Darn Cat, a Disney movie. One is good. And so one Robin, I think in the chat room was talking about for her 10th birthday, they had something like that for Sound of Music. So, that's, I'm sure, when you're walking around now, I mean, obviously, you look great for your age, but you don't look 7.
Oh, thank goodness. Thank
No,
goodness. That would be a really, really bad thing.
that would be
So,
strange.
yeah, no, nobody recognizes me from
I was going
Sound
to
of
say, so you
Music.
don't get anybody recognizing you.
I get people recognizing me sort of from, believe it or not, different things later. All my children or people like I saw you in some TV show, et cetera, et cetera. But and a lot of people think that I'm in the business. So, but sound if I say, and of course people say, well, what did I see you in besides blah blah blah? And I'm like, well, I don't know, The Sound of Music. And then that always brings down the house immediately.
Yeah.
They're like, ah, The
Like,
Sound of
oh, that's
Music.
really
And that is the international passports of all international passports.
sure.
I've had people from all over the world tell me incredible stories about going to see Sound of Music in Russia, in I mean, just everywhere. So it's been kind of it's kind of amazing, actually. You can't say it that people don't know it, pretty much.
Sure. I mean, well, like I said, I was trying to look and see, okay, what shows you've been in, because it said you were in. Oh, here's Robin Lee.
Hi,
Hi, Robin. How you
hi,
doing, Robin?
I'm good. How
Hello.
are you?
Hey there.
Hey, I just wanted to tell Kim that my mother took my girlfriends and I when I was 10 to see The Sound of Music at the most beautiful movie theater in Baltimore. It's called the Hippodrome. They've renovated it. It's
Yeah, the
beautiful.
Hippodrome.
But I think that started my lifelong love for theater. and I've always loved theater. I majored in college, and I just have always loved it. And I really think it started, at least for my girlfriends that went, we were 10 at the time, but it started our love of movies too. Because, we went to see it on the big screen, probably one of the first movies we had seen on the big screen. So that was 1965. So I just wanted to tell you that. And I think you're truly an angel for, the way you handle your son. And you've, been like, I think Don's an angel too, because of his love for his sister. And I was very touched too by the article that he wrote on Substack. And I just think you're both great. So that's all I wanted to
Thank you.
say.
Well, it
Yeah.
was a beautiful article. Thank you
Thank you.
very much. Thank you.
Thank
You
Thank
know
you,
you.
Robin.
what?
Appreciate it, Robin. Take care.
You'll like knowing this. I celebrated my 6th birthday on the set of The Sound of Music.
Oh, wow.
So there you
It's,
go.
it's when I think about that movie and the scenery and Julie Andrews, it's just, and I've been in the musical before. I forget what character. I was one of the kids, but I just always loved the music. And, it's just like, it's an icon. Like I think White Wolf said, it's like an icon. To me, Star Wars, but Sound of Music is
Yeah.
definitely up there in the top
Yeah.
5, I think, of all time.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's listed as on the, I think Gone with the Wind is always like number 1. And,
Casablanca.
yeah, Casablanca and Rosebud. That's not the name of it, but
Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane.
yeah,
Citizen
Citizen
Kane.
Kane. But I really think that Sound of Music might be number 1 for musicals. I don't know.
Well, I
I don't know
think
if
so,
there's
but
such a list.
of course I'm biased. But
Right.
yes, I
Well, you
agree.
should be. It was it's a phenomenal movie. The scenery is gorgeous. And
Yeah.
all the actors were terrific. I mean, it was just, it's a great movie. So thank you. I'm just so happy that you came on Don's show. It's been a great listen. Thank you.
Oh,
Well,
you're
thanks,
welcome.
Robin. Take
I'm gonna
care.
hang up.
Okay. We'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Take care. White Wolf, you're still out there. White Wolf says I'm still here. I didn't cut you off, buddy. So you can come back in if you want. I don't I don't know what happened to him, but his connection got up. But I was gonna say, so what do you say? There's so many people, obviously, and you probably hear this all the time. Anybody that when they find out you were in The Sound of Music, they probably go, it's probably it's amazing to them, and I'm amazed. In terms of like what do you think now when you yeah, everybody says they don't make movies. They certainly don't make movies like they used to, but what do you think of present day Hollywood? Do you still go to the movies or what are your
Oh, I
thoughts on that?
absolutely go to the movies. I do.
Hmm.
I love the movies. I try to go to see it on a big screen. Um, I go to see movies on the big screen as often as I can. And there's have been some movies that I find just wonderful, and there have been others that I don't quite understand why they bothered making them. And a lot in between, but I will support movies always.
Well, no one has talked about a remake of The Sound of Music, I don't think, as far as I've known. And White Wolf is back. Okay, White Wolf, give you another chance here. Okay, White Wolf, I don't know what happened. What's going on?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, it must be my computer. It's getting old and it just goes in and out and does this and that. And well, as I was saying, yes, the Sound of Music came out in that year, 1965. It was the closing of Vatican II. I think Beatlemania had just started. It was a very transitional year, and the Sound of Music was kind of, in my opinion, it was a throwback to the 1950s, sort of. I
Yeah.
could almost see the Legion of Decency in the background of
Yeah.
that movie, but it was just a nice family movie, and that was when the movies were starting to get a little bit raunchy, starting to get a little bit experimental, and so on and so forth. And no, I always envied you being in Salzburg. I think Salzburg is probably one of the most wonderful cities on earth. It's
So
it's
beautiful. Have you
it,
been there?
I've never been across the pond. The closest I could come to Salzburg was I was for a few months in Rifle, Colorado. Uh, but of course, Colorado is not as verdant as Austria. And the only thing that when I was really young, I always wondered how the captain could have been a naval captain, because Austria at that time was a landlocked country, and I couldn't see where they would need a navy. And I had no idea that they were once the Habsburg Empire, of course, and bordered on the Adriatic. But well, The Sound of Music, though, spurred my thinking, because I remember Julie Andrews saying, "Nothing comes from nothing, nothing ever will." And I remember that just being, that's a very profound statement. And I used to think about that when I was 5 years old. But between that and Star Trek, I was well on my way to being a philosophy major.
Oh, you're great. White Wolf is a regular listener. I'm going to let you go, buddy, because I want to with some more questions for her. But I appreciate you. Okay,
Oh,
you take
sure.
care. Thank you. Yeah, bye.
Mhm.
He's a great guy, but he's going to go off into. He'll eventually get around to Vatican II or something. That's what it does with him. He's a very unusual guy. As most of my people that want this show are. That's the kind of the people that are. Karen Carpenter, the lovely Karen Carpenter, says, "What are Kim's favorite movies? What are your favorite movies?"
Besides The Sound of Music, oh my God, I love An Affair to Remember. Every single time, I don't care how many times I've seen it, I cry every single time. I loved the movie Life is Beautiful. That it was an Italian movie.
Okay.
Absolutely amazing. Did you see that movie?
No,
It's,
I haven't seen them.
oh my God, it's so magnificent. And I don't know, let me think of some other ones, but those are right up there.
Oh, James. James Yonan says, "Wow, Kim Karath, Don, how did you manage to land that one? Good job." Well, they're excited to see her. Well, yeah, I mean, it's a big deal for somebody to have been in that kind. I mean, now I was going to ask, like, does Eric have any idea about what you did?
You
Has he ever seen
know,
the
oh my
music?
God, of course he's seen it because my son loves musicals. So
Right.
one of our favorite things to do is watch musicals. And I have like a huge collection. And yeah, he took after me in terms of loving dancing and singing and
Mhm.
having a real passion for that. So I have no doubt that it's something that he would have been wonderful at.
Well, he knows that's you as the little girl Gretel, right?
But this is a little more complicated, right? So
Yeah.
he loves the sound of music and he knows that we're associated with the sound of music.
Mhm, mhm.
And but every single time I'll get up and I'll say, "See, that was Mimi when Mimi was a little girl." And he kind of looks at me and he looks at the movie like, "Yeah, I don't." It's like, okay, I hear you. I sort of get it, but so he knows we're sort of a sound of music family, but it's hard for anyone to see a little tiny girl and then a grown-up person. And here's a funny Salzburg story. So I highly recommend going to Salzburg. It's amazing. It's like walking around in the movie, no kidding, because nothing changes there. They've have so much wonderful historical preservation that it is an unchanged. It's a Baroque city. It's amazing. And when I was 18, I went with my sister to Europe. We went a little European trip together. And she said, we went to Salzburg. She said, "Let's take the Sound of Music tour." They had just started the Sound of Music tour. And I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah, yeah, 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 let's do it." And I said, "Okay, if you promise me you do not tell anybody on that bus who I am." Of course, most sisters couldn't resist. And so mine didn't either. And she told them. And the rest, that's like I could hear people whispering after them. It's like, "That can't be Gretel. She's too old." I was 18, I mean, like time you
Mhm.
do the math, and I had
Yeah.
grown into a young woman. So anyway, yeah, just a funny aside on that.
Well, I think it's wonderful, and Karen Carpenter says a wonderful thing to share with your son. It is, but and maybe this is because Eric is different, but I know a lot of people. Like my favorite movie of all time is It's a Wonderful Life, and I remember reading that.
Oh, I love that movie too. You know what? I'm sorry I didn't mention that because I absolutely adore
Oh,
It's One.
that's
There's
almost.
another one. I can't stop crying at that movie when it's the end.
Oh,
Ever.
and every time when Harry Bailey says, "To my big brother George, the richest man in town," it
Oh
gets me every
yeah.
time.
Every
I've seen
time, me
it
too.
so many times,
Me too.
but I read that Donna Reed, the lovely Donna Reed, her daughter said that she never saw her mother never watched the movie. They never saw the movie until she was like an adult. And I think her mother was gone then. And I thought that
Wow.
was so weird. So, and a lot of actors are that way, especially somebody like you who didn't stay in the business that long. A lot of times they don't want to have anything to do with, they don't want to remember. Like I remember a couple of the kids that were in Leave It to Beaver didn't, they didn't want anything to do with, didn't want people to know the guy that played Larry Mondello, Beaver's friend. I researched all this when I was writing on Born Fame. Interesting stuff, but they tried to track him down. Rusty Stevens, the guy that played him, and they found his home. And his wife said, "No, he was on TV." He had never told his wife. She had no
Wow.
idea. That's how much he wanted to remain anonymous. And there are some people. I think it's great that you are,
Well,
that you
kind of
go.
hard to hide from Sound of Music, even if I had wanted to.
Yeah,
So,
no,
you
it would
know.
be. You're right, but it's nice that you embraced it. You should be proud of it. I don't know why anybody would. I never said, if I'd been on
Right.
Leave It to
No.
Beaver, I'd be proud of it. Why wouldn't you be proud of something like
People
an
have
iconic movie?
Well, I can speak to that. People had very different experiences. I'm, very good friends with a group of child actors, and people had very different experiences doing it. They weren't always pleasant by a long shot. This gives me the chance to address one of the comments that I often get, which is, "Wow, you're, very together, et cetera, et cetera. You're not like a lot of child actors. What prevented you from going down a road of
Yes, yes,
whatever?" And I it's a complicated answer because the answer, but well, it's complicated and not complicated. Acting as a child is child labor. It is. It can be good child labor, it can be bad child labor. It's still child labor. And you are expected to be there on time. You're expected to know your lines. You have to hit your marks. You have to deliver whatever it is that is wanted from you. It's work. And in some families, it wasn't true in mine, but in some families, the children become the number one wage earners in their
yes,
families.
yes, yep.
And that is a huge amount of pressure to put on a child. Huge, crushing, in fact. And so I will speak very vehemently about my fellow child actors because it's not all fun and games. Even though it's fun for the audience, that's the goal. It's not necessarily fun for them. And it may, it's funny because people actually sometimes are surprised by how much work is involved. Of course it's work. It's a movie. Time is money. Things have to get on that camera. So, on a plus side, I think for me specifically, I have a quite intense work ethic and I'm extremely professional with every single thing that I do. Whether I would have been that way if I hadn't spent my entire childhood basically doing this, I don't know. Maybe I would have, maybe I wouldn't have. But it's a very professional thing, and some situations, some familial situations don't lend themselves to stability whatsoever. And you may as well talk about child trafficking in a way, because, look at the girls that ended up vulnerable. Those are the same people who are vulnerable as child actors who have families that take advantage of them. So I always feel like there should be a lot more compassion and a lot less criticism for my
No, sure.
fellow comrades.
Well, I had Paul Peterson on my show a while back. He started a minor consideration. Speaking of Donna Reed, he played Donna Reed's son on the show there, and he's done great work. But it does sometimes seem like all of them had tragic lives, but too many did. And so maybe you weren't in the business long enough, I guess, to
Oh, I was
because
in the business a long enough time to have had it be tragic, but my family and my kind of educational grounding kept me solid.
that's
So,
great.
despite the rape, despite other things, and I did take time being away from the business in those years to just go ahead and get my degree and do other things in life. It was balanced out.
Sure.
So, I mean, I don't, and I will say most people who are affluent don't end up putting their children in the business. So there's
Right.
also an economic component to it. And I just think that there was mistreatment also in previous eras, fewer laws, fewer regulations.
Sure.
And, I
That's why
think,
you had
I think
the
children were
Jackie
harmed.
Coogan law. Yeah, sure.
That's right.
Because somebody has it's tragic what some of them went through, but I'm so glad you're obviously, especially with what you went through at 15, which that doesn't happen to most of these child stars that just kind of, but I think most of it is that they're looked at as washed up. I wrote a lot about the Little Rascals, our gang. I mean, I loved them, and they so many tragic stories there because they were really little. They were like younger than you. Spanky McFarland was probably washed up when he was 6. I mean, he was great when he was a toddler, but bad for that, and that's the problem that you have. Alfalfa, the same kind of thing where he's shot to death at age 30. He could never his voice changed and he couldn't do that singing anymore. And so a lot of tragedy, but you're a great success story of that. And you're much more than that. So, but we only have a few minutes left. In case my friend Susan Olson is listening out there, and you should be if you're not, what
Hey,
was it like on,
Suzanne.
yes, it was, what was it like? And I told if you, I don't know if Susan can comment on it, but with my sister that died that I wrote about, she looked so much like an older version of Susan. It's incredible. So I hope
Oh,
Susan. Yeah, I mean, she just really what. So it's spooky when I would now. It'll be real spooky when I see her the next time. But
will be. Yeah.
um, what was it like? Because I didn't realize what episode you were on of the Brady Bunch when I read. I said I remember that episode really well because you were so cute and you were about the right age of what I would be interested in at that time. And it really because it was like I think if I remember right, Peter had a crush on you, and you ended up going for his older brother Grove or something. That was the gist of the plot line. What was it like on there? Were they all real nice? I'm sure Susan was really misbehaving and a brat. But how were the rest of them?
Well, quickly, that episode was called Cyrano de Brady because
Yeah,
it took from Cyrano de Bergerac,
yeah, yeah.
because Greg ended up speaking for Peter and there was this big misunderstanding. Everybody was wonderful. They were delightful, delightful to work with. And I had known Maureen McCormick, who played Marcia, for many years because we were on auditions for things throughout our childhood. So it was like seeing an old friend, and everybody was great. I have a funny story with oh my gosh, what's the mother, Florence
Lawrence,
Henderson.
yeah.
So Florence was lovely and gracious when we did the show, of course, and many years later, after 9/11, I was flying, and remember when they were taking quote random passengers to, like, do you remember that time? So right after 9/11, they were just quote randomly, I forget what word they used, selecting passengers to do further investigation in them,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Right.
So I ended up with Florence, was me, Florence Henderson, and a lot of men from the Middle East randomly being looked at. And Florence and I looked at one another. It was just a funny moment. And it was like, yeah, that looks really, really believable as a random thing.
Oh, that must
Was
have been so
my
much
funny
fun.
my funny story from that.
Yeah, well, and somebody in the chat room says they remember that episode. It's just, if you saw these shows get run, that's why that was what started my idea for that book because I felt so bad for so many of these people that were on sitcoms and in bands back then too that had sold lots of records and they just didn't get paid. They just, especially the TV stars. How do you feel when you're in some like the idea was born? Spanky McFarlane was a huge fan of. He was bitter later in life because he got paid. He got paid okay for a kid back then, but nobody saw television coming. Same thing with the Three Stooges. 20, 30 years later, suddenly they're more famous than they've ever been. Little kids like me, we don't really know that some of them are dead, and we don't know. We think they're that way now. And they it's just something very sad about that somebody got, the Brady Bunch, Sherwood Schwartz got rich for all the reruns, and most of these kids were paid for, like, I don't know, maybe 3, 6, 7 reruns or something like that. And, hundreds, thousands, however many times they've been run. I don't know, I just think there's something unfair about that, but that's me. So that's a
It's so, you know what, it's so unfair. It just was the way things were back then. No matter how big of a film you were in, no matter how, popular a TV series was, people were paid a pittance
do you
compared to
now, The Sound of Music came, it should have been after that date. I think it was 1959 or 1960. Do you get some kind of residuals whenever The Sound of Music is
they're
shown?
they're 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 pretty paltry.
No,
Yes,
I'm sure
but
they're paltry, yeah, but
yeah.
yeah, it's yeah, I know.
And
I've seen
I
the
did grow up in the era of residuals, but
yeah.
I mean, people tend to think people in larger, famous things are extremely well paid, but it's not always the case. In fact, yeah, it's not.
Yeah,
So
that's what again, research. I think I have a line in the book about that. We all growing up thinking somebody's in a TV show or they must be really rich
and
at
they
some
must be
point.
made for life, right?
Yes, they
And
must be
while
made for life.
that's true of Friends, and it's true of Two and a Half Men, and it's been true of
Yes,
shows
modern
in, but
Seinfeld, yeah, sure. Big Bang
not
Theory, yeah.
back then. No.
No, they were, and that was what that book was for. So it's people. I don't know how many people that are watching this, or they don't talk about that book very often because they want to talk about other stuff. But anyway, we're just about out of time. I want to give you time. Any closing thoughts? You've been lovely, as I knew you would be, and just wonderful conversation, so interesting. And that, obviously a variety. We've kind of been all over the place because we're
We have been.
bouncing back and forth, kind of a couple of subjects. Anything you want to close with and promote your organization or anything you want to say? Give out any links or whatever.
Well, just you can look at our Creative Steps. It's creativesteps.org if anyone is interested in learning more about it or supporting us in any way, or rather our kids. And other than that, I'm really hoping I'll be filming a movie in Paris that I wrote. So you can send some good thoughts my way for that.
What is the organization, or Aurelia? You said, is that
It's the
can
Aurelia Foundation, but our program is Creative Steps, and our website is creativesteps.org.
okay? But that
And it
just in
explains
California? Do
everything.
are you
It
looking?
is in California for now. Honestly, if we could, grow, which obviously it's our goal, it would be great to have it other places because I know the need is vast. And if we have a waiting list of 150 families, that just tells, a tough story about what's available and out there.
Well, that's amazing. This has been so much fun and a real pleasure for me. And again, God bless you. You're doing great. You sound like Mother of the Year, maybe Mother of the Millennium, and so you're doing a great job there. And anybody can see and that how happy your son is and how much the love comes out in all the pictures you take him. He's obviously central to your life, and that's just what he's very fortunate to have you. And so I really appreciate you sharing his story and sharing all your anecdotes from Hollywood. That's for people that love the sound of music and shows like Brady Bunch and stuff that you were on. So thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It was really a pleasure. I enjoyed it a lot.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for all your questions, everything. We'll see you next week. Probably back into our normal fare next week. So we'll talk to you next week. Same time next week on I Protest. Thanks for listening.